This channel is for educational purposes only. Please do your own due diligence before making any investment decisions.
This is Joe Rabil. Welcome back. We're going to do a stock market update, and we've got some shifts taking place on the shorter term time frames. We've got to take a hard look at that and see how meaningful they are. And then we're going to look at some spots of where support could come in. And maybe just frame out what we should expect. All right. And if we want to learn more about some of these techniques, especially with the MACD and ADX in multiple timeframes, I would suggest starting with the book. You can go to rabilstockresearch.com/book for more information. Also, if you enjoy this content, please hit that like button and also subscribe. Okay, let's run through the market conditions. We currently are showing no change this week in the sentiment. Still have it at neutral. It's borderline. It could be a little bit more this way. I wouldn't quite put it in the negative camp. Again, we're looking for something closer to 40% before we would look at that. Now, I'm sort of expecting it to drop from here now based on what the market is doing. But just have to keep an eye on that. Again, they update that on Wednesdays. And so overbought, oversold. We've got this RSI 5 that has dropped down. Actually is at 47. It must have just ticked lower in the aftermarket or something. So we're looking at, reaching the neutral camp. All right. We're not overbought, not oversold. Not what I would call an ideal setup on the buy side right now. And the main reason is this volatility is still too high. So one of the things I've been talking about is this the question is that when we pull back to the 18, would it be big bars, right? If we got orderly small bars, then this could keep dropping and this could roll over. And then all of a sudden we could have ourselves a nice little pullback setup. All right. I'm going to go into that a little bit more in just a second, but let me just point out a couple of things. Number one, last week, the momentum switched to neutral on both the weekly and the daily. It wasn't a small thing. It was kind of a big deal to me to flip those over simply because, market had been motoring along here. So I'll go into those in a minute as well. Now, the daily chart has flipped to neutral as well in terms of the trend. All right. The momentum had already started to kind of give it up a little bit, but now we're getting a potential trend shift starting to develop. I'll go into that in a second as well. All right, let's look at this, what's taken place here today. So one of the things I talked about with my subscribers this week was, we had low volatility on this time frame and high volatility on this time frame. All right, we had a nice pullback here and I'm going to show you in a second how the MACD helped us determine that we were going to get a little test. All right. And then if you noticed here, we did the same thing. We got another test. This time, instead of triggering back to the upside, we're actually triggered to the downside. When I get to the hourly, you can see how we kind of define this. Now, one thing I do want to point out, we are coming up against some price support from the breakout area, and look at this RSI 5 on the daily chart is down in the teens. All right. Now you can go back and look at this. This is pretty low. I mean, this doesn't get this low that often. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to turn on a dime. It just means you got to be a little bit careful about getting too bearish at this point in time. Doesn't mean it can't go lower. Just means, a lot of times I see guys and they're like, oh, I want to get short or something like that. And then this bounces up while this is rolling over. And then you're really kind of in a really uncomfortable position because you're kind of right, but your timing is wrong. So that's why we want to use the hourly. I'm going to show you kind of what I would be doing now based on that. But I think the big thing is the volatility is still high on the weekly. All right. The daily is shifting upward, but not to the point where it's turning negative. Still positive right now on the volatility for the daily chart. All right. Now, one of the things I just want to do is just, I want to point something out. All right. So I've got a monthly here, weekly here, daily here, and an hourly here. All right. Now, when I pull up a chart, and I want everyone to understand this, I know I'm analyzing the S&P every Friday. But the reality is I'm trying to show you how to analyze any instrument, and how I would go about doing it. And so one of the things, if you watch the Tuesday video, right, we were stretched here and we were kind of getting stretched here. Very similar to what I was talking about in that AFL pattern, okay? So that's the first. So one of the things that I notice when I go through and look at charts and I pull up a stock and I have these 4 time frames up, I just want to take a general glimpse and just what hits me right away. All right. And one of the things that's been hitting me is how long this has been kind of stretched away. And it just is, it's a little uncomfortable, even though the momentum is fine. All right. So once I get 2 time frames where we get stretched away, then we want to be looking a little bit more closely at these time frames for signs of reversal. All right, so just something I like to just want you to understand that one of the ways that I'm looking at things. All right, so we've been talking about the trend being positive on the weekly. All right, and the MACD really did confirm this last peak. It made a higher high here. This peak to this peak, that was a higher high, and this was a higher high. So I know you could go back and compare it to that if you want. I don't usually do that. I look at the most recent one. Again, I try and stay in that 8 to 12 bar window when I'm doing that. So I don't really consider this a divergence, but I am a little bothered by the fact that this is flipping back down. Now, again, it's on the weekly. So if we got to come back on Friday, if Friday's trading is good, then this might not close below the signal line. But something you want to be watching here, if that turns down from this juncture, I think that really increases the likelihood that we've got a correction on our hands and it's going to head its way back and test this area of the 18-week, which is something I think makes sense to me. Now, one of the things that's bothering me about this and what I've pointed out again to subscribers is I like the fact that the green was above here, but the fact that it didn't really break out and go, and we had 4 or 5 weeks straight of up moves, it couldn't cause this to really get going. It's concerning to see this ADX so low. I mean, we're at 16 after a pretty decent move to the upside. So it's not really confirming to the upside, and now we're getting a big red bar here. I think if I'm looking at this on a weekly chart, I'm probably looking for a re-entry of this breakout area. If we have enough weakness and we come back down through that, then we kind of confirm the reversal. Now, when we go to the daily chart, you can see we're kind of already increasing the odds that we're heading down to the 18-week, because look at what happened. We actually had a reverse divergence signal here. This was a reverse divergence. So this was making a higher low. This was making a lower low. All right. But at the same time, we had this move up, this pullback, and then look at the way this played out. We formed this counter parallel lines. These are all signals from my course. I think that it's definitely worthwhile if you want to learn some of these techniques in detail. The course is going to give you a lot of examples and how to kind of go through that and understand them better. Now, we're kind of thinking that the bias is to the upside, so we don't have any preconceived notions. And that's why when I look at this there's a positive signal here, reverse divergence, and then we have this counter parallel line signal that is basically a bearish pinch, right? This is walking along the 18. But it's not bouncing off the 18. I don't like that when it's almost like water building on a dam when it sits and keeps staying connected to the 18 on this time frame. And while this is staying below, it's almost acting like an anvil and creating some weight to it. All right. Now you'd add in this for this to get this range. That's a big giant red bar to the downside. I mean, that's a big elephant bar, a big giant red bar to the downside. Don't really want to see that, but it does increase odds that we're going to come test. I think the 18-week, I think that's a pretty high probability, especially with the election coming. I kind of was surprised that we weren't starting to get a pullback leading up to the election, but maybe now we pull back into the election and then we'll see what happens. Now, I want to look at this hourly chart because the way I had framed it out this week for my subscribers was we had a trend line break here, we pulled back, and then we were consolidating. So we had this horizontal line up here to shift the trend and confirm the trend going back to the upside. But at the same time, we also had essentially a trend line break to this side. All right. I mean, meaning we made a move. So you really would be connecting. This is the anchor for the pivot for the trend line. We did break that trend line here, and then we have a horizontal line here. So I basically have a 1, 2, 3 setup in both directions. All right. Meaning I don't have to be a hero. I don't have to make a decision. Now, what I will say is this looked like a rally and a downtrend to me with overrun. Right now, it ended up coming down, bouncing up, coming down, bouncing up, and then coming down through. And then obviously pretty tough trigger unless you took the 40 break. I mean, really, what I was suggesting was either looking at, this trend line here that developed near the end, or taking out this horizontal trend line here. And obviously it happened via a gap. Now, I mean, what you can do is look at the RSI 5 on the hourly and see if you get some kind of a retracement back up, back towards these moving averages, and see if it fails. And if that happens with this kind of strength, then there's enough room to the 18-week. So this is how I would frame this out now. I know we've got a pretty high probability that we want to work this down to the 0 line on the MACD here. And I think there's a pretty high probability we want to come back to this next trend support, 560, something like that. So the question becomes, can you create yourself a setup on a rally here, get an RSI sell signal here, all right, closer enough to the moving averages. And the reason why I want to use the RSI here, I get some questions on this. I mean, you see the strength that we're pretty far from the moving average. And so what I don't want you to do is look at this as just any kind of a minor rally and short it, because we're a little too far from here. We're already kind of getting into this next support zone. So the way I do it is I look for an RSI signal. I need the RSI 5 to get back over 50 and do that for a closing hour. And then if we're close enough to these moving averages, then you have a pretty good setup for a potential move down to next support on this time frame. See, we've broken the trend, we've broken support on this time frame, and the next target area is going to be in here. All right. Now, it could break the 18 a little bit, but you kind of want to use that as your barometer in how you're framing out your next trade. So if you're going to trade this to the downside for either shorting it, just free shorting it, or doing a hedge, I think you want to set up. Now, you could have done the gap down this morning. Obviously, as I mentioned, you could have done that. Kind of a rough entry. Obviously, it would have worked in your favor. And if you did that, good for you. But I think you could wait and see if you get a rally if you didn't do that, and see what kind of rally it is. I mean, if you get a monster green bar here, then you don't really want to be doing that. But if you get a weak rally back towards the moving averages, get that relief rally on an RSI 5 basis, and the RSI 20 stays below 50 with this kind of strength, I think I'd be willing to play that to the downside. All right, so that's the update for the week. Let me know if you have any questions.